Lucky Break. Written by Deborah Coonts. Narrated by Patricia Santamasso. Chapter 1. Me getting married. I still couldn't believe it. We hadn't set a date, but still, married. When Jean-Charles asked me to marry him, I had said yes. One simple word. I'd said it 1,000,000 different times, in 1,000 different contexts, with no life-altering consequences. Well, except for the whole Teddie thing. That hadn't worked out quite as I'd hoped, but about like I'd feared. He'd loved me and left. If I'd listened to more country music, maybe I could have avoided that. For good or for ill, I paused one last time in front of the full-length mirrors in my closet that caught all sides. Normally, I avoided the things like I avoided my mother, both for good reason. At 6 feet and, shall we say it, fully fleshed out, I fell far short of my mother's dream that I would become a dancer on the Vegas Strip. Alas, I became something much worse, a hotel executive. Specifically, the vice president of customer relations at the Babylon, Vegas's premier strip property. But despite my lofty rung on the corporate ladder, Mona still made me feel guilty that I didn't live down to her expectations. Why is it we all want what we can't have? Teddie. As if hearing her lead in or something, Mona breezed into my boudoir. "Well, don't you look every inch the virginal bride," Mona said with her barbed tongue planted firmly in her cheek. Resplendent in a rich shade of burnt orange organza that darkened and lightened as she moved, one shoulder bare, the bodice fitted, the skirt flowing, she looked every inch the hotel magnate's wife. To further fill her days, she was also the mother of month-old twins and a candidate for public office, the county commission, if the voters didn't wise up soon. With the vote almost a year away, she was ahead in the polls, which frightened the hell out of me, but also made me grudgingly proud. My 24/7 job would never allow the time for a family and a job as a servant of the people. I don't know how she did it. The wear and tear showed in added crow's feet and a subtle weariness dimming her normal wattage. Her brown hair was pulled into a chignon, with tendrils of hair left to softly frame her face. The baby weight had almost disappeared. What was left softened her angular features and rounded her in an appealing, maternal way. Recent motherhood had made her even more stunning. A cross-eye bore. Her blue eyes, round with hurt and accentuated with black liner, put me on guard. "Red does suit you," she added, as she eyed me with the calculation of a children's beauty pageant momzilla. I'd chosen a strapless sheath of fire engine red with tiny gold threads running through the bodice, just in case the red was too subtle. The 5-carat emerald-cut diamond sparkled on the ring finger of my left hand. Every now and again I'd look at it, just to make sure. Still, I couldn't believe it. Me, getting married. Holding on to my mother's shoulder, I used her to steady myself as I donned first one low-heeled strappy Jimmy Choo, then the other. "Is this a social call?" I asked my mother, knowing her wounded doe eyes provided the answer, but hoping just this once she'd let her bet ride. But she'd gone out of her way, making the trip from the Babylon, so the odds were against me. "What?" She feigned offense. "Lucky, you act as if I don't want to check on my daughter every now and again." "Yes, my name is Lucky. Last name, O'Toole. And to be honest, I have no idea where either name came from, and I'm too scared of the answer to ask." "Well, since this is your first visit in ages, it does make me wonder." I leaned close to the mirror to check my makeup one last time. I still wasn't used to the whole lipstick, powder, blush routine, but I did like the result, especially the shadow and eyeliner that accentuated my blue eyes, even if they still carried a hint of shell shock in them. I applied one more swipe of pink gloss, then pressed my lips together. "I know you well enough to see an ulterior motive lurking behind your innocent act." She gave me the hint of a smile, a kid caught with black cats at school. "I want to talk to you about Jean-Charles." "None of your business." She ignored my frosty tone and eyes that had gone all squinty. "Are you sure about this? Are you sure Jean-Charles isn't one of those boomerang things?" "Boomerang?" The visual was interesting. "You mean rebound things? I corrected, before my brain kicked in, shutting down my mouth. She knew perfectly well what she meant, and she misspoke to get me to engage. Would I never learn? Exactly. You're not over Teddie and what he did. So you don't want to talk about Jean-Charles, you really want to talk about Teddie. And your father. That one whirled in out of left field, tripping my heart. The big boss? He's okay, right? Ever since he had that heart scare not too long ago, I hadn't been able to shake a feeling of impending doom. A dose of mortality to puncture his Mount Olympus aura. Of course, he's fine. Mona shrugged that suggestion away, a horse shaking off a fly. It's what he's doing to Teddie. Teddie? This was my night. Jean-Charles's night. Tonight's party celebrating the opening of Jean-Charles's restaurant, JC Vegas, would be the kickoff to a 10-day celebration of the grand opening of my very own hotel, Cielo. And she had to bring Teddie into it? I gave her a look that I hoped would instill terror. Curiously, Mother, when Teddie left, he ceased being my problem. Mona rolled her eyes. Did you just roll your eyes at me? A hand on my hip, I felt like the parent here. Really? Keep doing that, and maybe you'll find a brain in there somewhere. I grabbed my purse, a sweet little evening bag in red and gold to match my dress. Who knew love could turn this tomboy all girly-girly? If I started giggling, I'd hate myself. Mona dogged my heels as I strode through my bedroom and into the main room of my apartment. Now where did I put my wrap? Mona's voice held the tinny notes of a whine, fraying my already on-edge nerves. Lucky, you have to deal with Teddie. Taking a deep breath, I counted to 10. Twice. My gaze wandered around the room as I drank it all in. The view of the strip through the wall of windows, the white walls, the burnished wood floor, the white leather furniture, and the splashes of color on the walls. Original paintings depicting the glory of the Mojave. My home. My sanctuary. Me. I have dealt with Teddie, Mother. Done. Over. Finished. But your father... Mona trotted after me, breathless. He's canceling Teddie's contract. My father had offered Teddie his former theater to develop and stage a new show, one based on Teddie as a singer, rather than the great Teddie Devine, Vegas's foremost female impersonator, his previous gig. I was glad that was behind him. I'd tired of him rooting in my closet for costumes and stretching out my shoes. Especially my shoes. When my father had invited Teddie back into the fold, he hadn't consulted me. Both of my parents considered it their duty to meddle in my life. Up to now, they'd been irritating but not hurtful. Jerking the contract out from under Teddie, that was a knife to the heart. Teddie would wither and die without his audience, and no matter what he'd done, how much he'd disappointed me, I didn't want to see him broken. Punishment, like revenge, wouldn't ease the pain. Oh, maybe in the short term, but I didn't want my future to be burdened with guilt. The high road, Lucky. The high road. I stopped and whirled on Mona, almost meeting her nose to nose. What do you mean, canceled his contract? She drew up, shoulders back, chin at a defiant angle, the look in her eyes a slap, a trait she'd taken from my father. He wore it better and could back it up. Teddie's out, with no place to go, and it's all your fault. This time, I rolled my eyes, and I knew that no matter how many times I did it, I wouldn't find a brain in my hollow head. Of course it's not my fault. I don't know anything about it, so stop doing that. Wow. Apparently, I had shucked some emotional armor and exposed a backbone. You have to fix it. Mona wrung her hands. She used to campaign against Teddie, telling me he'd leave me for a life on the road. She'd been right. He'd broken my heart. And now he and my mother were best friends? Unlike her daughter, he had lived down to her expectations, so I guessed she had a soft spot. There was all sorts of wrong in that. Without you and Teddie being an item, her eyes slipped to the ring on my finger and then back to mine. Your father has less incentive to keep him around. Don't be silly, Mother. This is all about money. You know the big boss. With a hand on one hip, I eyed Mona as I plotted my battle strategy. Brush her off, or look into the problem. Which would be the least painful path? To ignore her would bring out her inner piranha. She'd keep biting off chunks of my resolve until I finally caved. Easier to get it over with. I'll look into it, Mother. First, I have to know what the deal is, and why the big boss is canceling it. Mona opened her mouth, but I heard Teddie's voice. He got a better offer. Teddie strolled in from the kitchen, looking like $1,000,000 before taxes. Spiky blonde hair, blue eyes rimmed with lashes most women would sacrifice body parts for. Broad where he should be, trim where he shouldn't, a tight ass, and a voice like honey. The guy was a walking, talking, singing pheromone. I whirled on my mother. You asked Teddie down? So you two could gang up on me? Tonight? Teddie's apartment connected to mine through a back staircase, which used to be convenient. Now, it was a violation. And a betrayal. I narrowed my eyes at my mother and wondered what the punishment for matricide was these days. If everyone's mother was like Mona, it couldn't be that bad. But everyone couldn't be so lucky. Mona didn't look sorry. A stacked deck is the best kind, she said, parroting her husband. In business? She met me glare to glare. This is business. My business, I should think, Teddie said. Look, if it's any consolation, I didn't want to mention this at all. My presence here is as much a part of Mona's setup as your help is. But here it is, short and sweet. Your father canceled my contract because Holt Box said he'd do 30 weeks a year for 5 years, coup of epic proportions getting him to come out of retirement. He'll be a huge draw for the Babylon, much more than I would. Although Teddie adopted a casual air, he was angry. It boiled just below the surface. His smile was taut with the effort to cover it. I was blindsided. 10 years ago, Holt had left country music at the peak of his career, devastating his legions of female fans and making himself into the stuff of legend. And now, the Babylon was hosting his coming out of retirement tour? How could the big boss have inked such a deal without me being in on it? Considering my parents made me and my life their business, I didn't have to think on it too hard. In a way, Mona had been right. It was my fault, of a sort. Business and pleasure, almost impossible to separate, and my father didn't have enough confidence in me to do so. Grudgingly, I admitted, in this case, he was probably right. If I'd been left to negotiate the Holt Box deal, I would have been hard-pressed to do so. But that wouldn't stop me from letting my father know how I felt, about all of it. Promises were promises. And when it came to love, I didn't need him riding in on his white horse to vanquish the unworthy, or to save me from my own mistakes. Teddie had a lot riding on his new show. He'd put his heart and soul into it, and he'd given up his spot on his newly rejuvenated tour. Finally, the rage burbled to the surface, coloring his face and hardening his voice. Holding up his hand, he stopped the platitudes I was going to offer. I didn't have anything else, and he knew me well enough to know it. Don't fret. Not that you would. Your father had the legal right to do what he did. Being legal doesn't make it right. Teddie's anger cooled. You always tilt at windmills, don't you? One of the things I love about you. In a gray world, you see black and white. Principles. I left it to the Harvard boy to fill in all the rest. Principles applied to life and love. Hiking up the flaps of his tux jacket, he stuffed his hands in his pockets. This whole thing is my own damned fault. In such a hurry to get back here, back to... He gave me an open, vulnerable look that tore at my heart. But that was a pipe dream. In my haste, I agreed to stuff Rudy went apoplectic over. Rudy Gillespie was his entertainment lawyer, one of my good friends, and married to an even better friend, Jordan Marsh, the Hollywood heartthrob who had finally come out, dashing hopes of young women worldwide. I knew what Teddie had left out, what he wanted to say. He'd been in a hurry to get back to me, back to us, after having thrown me over for a lineup of groupies. Trust, an emotional Humpty Dumpty. Don't forget, Holt Box had a hand in all of this, added Mona. Teddie's anger sizzled as it flared anew. His shoulders rose toward his ears as his face closed. Yeah, that dude is on the top of my hit list. If you want to kill him, don't do it tonight. Murder has such a chilling effect on fun and frivolity. I spied my gold pashmina on the couch. Grabbing it in one swoop, I headed for the elevator. One advantage of having one of the top floors was a private elevator that fetched me from the middle of my great room. I'm late, and Teddie, I'm sorry. I really am. I'll see what I can find out. But right now, I need to go. You two have a fine time. It's well past pumpkin time, and I've got to hurry.
Holt Box will be there tonight?
Teddie's voice lost any hint of nice. What rock have you been living under? I wrapped the pashmina around my shoulders. Decembers could be cool in Vegas. He's cooking with Jean-Charles. Apparently, he loves to cook, has a cookbook out or something, I don't know. In my world of late nights and early mornings, finding a meal involved finding the time to grab something quick and convenient. Holt asked to assist. Jean-Charles said yes.
And you went along with it?
Not my purview. And trust me, having him in the kitchen during the opening might sound like a great media play, but it's been a nightmare of epic proportions. For weeks, gaggles of female predators looking for their hunk of country music flesh have been stalking the well-guarded perimeter of the Cielo property. Too late, I realized I'd added fuel, igniting Teddie's slow burn into a raging inferno. Hate flushed his face. A new look. I didn't like it, but I got it. Mona chose that moment to wade back in. I have Paolo waiting downstairs. She studiously analyzed her fingernails as she dropped that little bombshell. But I have Paolo waiting downstairs, I said, as the realization that my mother could now overrule me at the hotel hit me like a bucket of ice water. I jabbed at the elevator button. Thankfully, the thing was waiting. The doors opened, and I stepped inside, followed by Mona and Teddie, rounding out our awkward trio. When the doors closed, Teddie's reflection half smiled at mine, an appreciated effort to cut through the ugliness. Still, I felt he was contemplating burying a knife in my back. How fun to have all of the blame and none of the authority. In the closed space, the subtle aroma of very good scotch, or very bad bourbon, competed with his Old Spice cologne. Apparently, he'd gotten a head start, some joy juice to deaden the downside. From the look on his face, I could tell he wanted to change the subject as much as I did.
Now that is a dress,
he said, a hint of warmth melting the ice in his tone. While he looked appreciative of the wrapping, I knew he liked the package as well. A bit of sad longing brushed over my heart. We'd been so good together, until we weren't. His smile dimmed when he caught the flash of my ring. He reached around my shoulder, pulling me close, shoulder to shoulder in a one-arm embrace. Catching me off guard, I fell into him. My hand braced against his chest, the other grabbed his waist, as I struggled to get my feet back underneath myself.
Sorry,
Teddie said, not sounding the least bit as he helped me right myself. Mona, looking a bit uncomfortable, had put as much space as possible between her and me, which wasn't much, given we were in an elevator. Teddie stood close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off him. Anger? Passion? Didn't know and didn't care. Straightening my gown and my thoughts, ordering the outside to cover the muddle inside, I focused on the party ahead and ignored both of them as the elevator whisked us downstairs. As we pushed into the night, Paolo was indeed waiting by one of the Babylon's limos, wringing his hands. He snapped to attention when he caught sight of me. A small man with jet black hair slicked back, an always impeccable uniform, a normally ready smile, and enough energy to light Vegas for a year. Tonight Paolo looked uneasy. Another hapless male fallen prey to Mona's charms, and I'm sure her veiled threats. He rushed to open the back door for me.
Oh, Miss Lucky, Paolo is so very sorry. Mrs. Rothstein.
I know, threatened to boil you in oil or something. Don't worry, it's fine. I stopped before I disappeared into the dark confines of the car. Just ignore them, I whispered. Maybe they'll go away. Paolo nodded, his smile forced, terror in his eyes. He situated Mona next to me and Teddie in front, then slid behind the wheel. I checked the clock. 10 minutes until a press conference my father had arranged. If I wasn't there, heads would roll. I toggled the switch that would allow Paolo to hear, despite the glass window raised to cocoon the back. "Paolo, the time?"
"Yes, miss."
Paolo pressed his cap on tight as he gripped the wheel, his knuckles white.
"Hold on."
I reached for the looped strap near my left ear and held on. Mona tapped me on the leg to get my attention, like we'd been having a nice conversation and I'd gotten distracted. She recoiled when I looked at her with my not-so-happy face. "This is my night, Mother. How dare you?" She looked crestfallen, her best gambit. I didn't cave. Teddie lowered the window separating the front seat from the rear compartment.
"Lucky, I'm sorry. Mona said—"
I held up my hand, cutting him off. "Playing the hapless stooge in a game run by women is getting old, and it is not attractive. You know Mona, and you know our rules. We are friends, but you are not allowed in my apartment unless you have a specific invitation from me."
"At least you're talking,"
Mona said with more than a little gloat.
"This is wonderful,"
she said with bright eyes. A bit late to wise up, Teddie ignored her.
"Mona said you'd be okay with it."
"Mona lies," I said, transfixing my mother with a stare. But Teddie knew that already. "Paolo, step on it before I kill somebody." Tires squealed as he did as I asked, fishtailing the big car onto Koval, then accelerating south. The forward momentum of the large car pressed me back in my seat and scared Mona into quiet. In less than 5 minutes, with several tourists terrified but still breathing, Paolo turned up the grand drive to Cielo. Huge trees lined the curved entrance, giving the hotel a secretive feel, as if one had to be in the know to find the place. Like the mansion at MGM, Cielo was a decadent hideaway for those who valued their privacy or just needed a respite from the constant pulsing energy of the Strip. The front entrance, normally protected by large gates and armed security, stood open, ready to receive all tonight. Protected under a copper porte-cochere and softened with pots of riotous flowering plants, the entrance was welcoming and warm, with understated elegance. The architects had bent under my supervision and used rock, wood, and other natural building materials where possible. The effect was stunning, warm, and welcoming, like a Japanese sanctuary. Frosted glass with images of reeds etched into them separated the large space into smaller vestibules. When the hotel officially opened, hosts would greet each guest, escorting them to a desk where the registration process would be handled with a glass of champagne. The waterfall on the far wall lent a comforting sound as well as humidity to the parched desert air. Yes, the place had turned out exactly as I'd hoped. When the big boss and I had bought the property out of foreclosure, I had imagined this, dreamt of it, but never really thought I'd pull it off. The building, which we'd taken down to the bare bones, then built out, adding on where we could, had housed one of the grand dames of Vegas past, the Athena. Irv Gibbs, the former owner, would never recognize what had been the diamond in his crown. Life had taken a hard turn for old Irv. The rest of us moved on, and he went to jail. Through the glass, I could see Jean-Charles just inside the front entrance, talking to a group of reporters. Resplendent in his chef's whites, the trousers black and white striped, he looked at ease amid the well-liveried crowd milling about the lobby in their formal dress. His brown hair curled softly over the collar of his jacket. Trim, with broad shoulders and a slightly formal bearing, he made my heart melt. When the limo eased in next to the curb, he moved to meet us as if he'd been watching, which he probably had. He opened the door, extended a hand, and pulled me into his embrace. Flashbulbs popped as I lost myself in his kiss. For a moment, the world disappeared, and it was just the two of us.
"You are late,"
he whispered against my cheek.
"I was worried."
I kept my arms looped around his neck. "Shanghaied by my mother. I'm sorry. Shouldn't you be upstairs?" He gave me a Gallic shrug and an irresistible smile that lit his robin's egg blue eyes.
"This is more important."
"There's just something about the French. Romance oozing out of every pore," Mona cooed. Even though her words sounded benign, I felt the prick of her jab. Apparently, Jean-Charles didn't. His eyes warm, never drifted from mine.
"You look good enough to eat." This is right, no?
On a never-ending quest to learn American idioms, Jean-Charles never missed a chance to trot one out. Tonight, he got it right. Most of the time, not so much, with charming consequences. High praise indeed from a master chef. He beamed, until he caught sight of Teddie with Mona now leaning possessively on his arm, claiming her horse in this race.
Your mother and her games.
While the words were light, his tone was not.
Mona, how good to see you,
he said, slipping into a well-honed insincerity. Mona smiled, unaware of the frost chilling his words.
Theodore, I didn't know you were attending.
Jean-Charles acknowledged Teddie, but didn't extend a hand as he ushered us all inside.
Your father is waiting. He is a bit angry.
Why?
The reporters, they only want to talk to you.
He led me to the half-circle of chairs bookending a couch and lighted for the media.
I will be upstairs. The food
needs your attention. I gave him a quick kiss. Go. I'll be there as soon as I can. I watched him as he worked his way toward the elevators, admiring the ease with which he made each person he spoke with shine, like they felt like the most important person in the world. Where did sincerity end and civility begin? With the French, it was hard to tell. So polished, so smooth. Lucky? A light touch on my arm rescued me just before I slipped into insecurity. Kimberly Cho, one of the PR people who had been helping me with a sticky problem at the big boss's Macau property, looked up at me, her eyes a bit too wide, her normal polished perfection a bit ruffled. Do you have a moment? It's important. I won't take much of your time. Her black hair drawn back in a soft chignon, her porcelain skin lightly blushed, her eyes cold. She'd chosen a one-shoulder sheath of exquisitely embroidered Asian silk in turquoise. I envied the ease with which she carried her elegance. Although short and trim, she had the presence of someone much taller. You know I wouldn't ask unless it was important. I know. I checked the time. I glanced at my father, a light sheen on his face from the heat of the Klieg's. The interviewer and her attendants shifted nervously. Everyone waiting on yours truly. Will it wait until after my interview? Everyone is waiting. Her hand shook as she tucked in a strand of hair that had the audacity to wander loose. There's this man. A very bad man. You must be careful. What? Who? I knew him from before. Her eyes stared past me. Her face went slack. Kimberly, what is it? When her eyes again shifted to mine, they looked dead. Be careful. With a nod, she backed away. Find security, then meet me at the elevator, I called after her. We'll ride up alone. You have my undivided attention, and we'll have some privacy. I turned to go. Something in the way she looked bothered me. The paleness of her skin, the slight haunted look in her eyes. She wasn't scared. She was terrified. Why did I let her go? I whirled around to call her back. She was gone. I scanned the crowd. Nothing. I couldn't wait any longer. Kimberly would be waiting at the elevator, I told myself, as I painted on a smile and mentally shifted, grinding a few gears and threatening to throw the transmission. My father waited, his smile firmly in place, his eyes questioning.
You look like you've seen a ghost,
he said, half joking. Once removed? At his confused look, I said, a friend. She looked troubled.
You can help her.
My father stated that like a certainty. Helping people, solving problems, was a yin and yang kind of thing. Sort of like the push and pull of life. I loved helping people. Then I resented them for needing too much. Drawing boundaries was not a tool in my toolbox. I'm sorry, I cut it rather close, I said, settling myself. A perfunctory peace offering, as a young man worked to find a place for the mic on my minimal bodice. Seated next to my father, with Teddie and Mona stashed somewhere in the back of the crowd, the lights hot and unforgiving, I felt like a captive awaiting interrogation. While I was often the spokesperson for the Babylon, I wasn't used to having the spotlight turned on me, on my personal life. Everyone wanted to see my ring, which I thought odd, and an invasion of a sort. My father chuckled at my discomfort. Tonight, sharp in his tux, his salt and pepper hair perfectly groomed, his square jaw thrust slightly out as if begging for a fight, My father looked every inch the hard-scrabble hotel magnate he was. "Throwing me to the wolves. How ungallant of you," I pretended to grouse.
"It's your show, kid. I'm old news."
According to those present, I had managed to sidestep the most invasive questions, keeping the interview on topic, and I didn't offend anyone in the process. A clear win in my book, but I didn't remember much of it. Panic derails any ability I might have to remember clearly. The pain was so great, if I remembered it, I'd never do it again. Like love. Pain and pleasure. Emotional triggers separated by perception. Having Teddie around scratched at the thin scab over the tear in my heart. I wished he'd leave, which, had I chosen to listen, should have told me something. But I didn't. I paused to speak with a few colleagues and old friends. Even though 2 million people lived in Vegas, in many ways it still was a small town. The power elite, the casino owners and representatives, a few local professionals peddling regulatory connections, or perhaps insight earned from years in the business, and the requisite attorneys to create messes where there were none, and the PR people to repair the damage. It was a small group. We hung out at the same parties, knew the same people, fought the same battles, often on opposite sides. But if one of us succeeded, Vegas succeeded. So when the contests were over, the winner declared, we all settled back into being wary combatants, always looking to realign allegiances to better our positions. Nerve-wracking and exhausting. The big boss was a pro, I an unwilling acolyte, strictly third string. At the elevator, I waited, surprised Kimberly wasn't lurking close by. Since we'd talked, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was in some sort of trouble. Silly, I kept telling myself, but I'd seen enough trouble to know how it looked, and how it felt, worming its way inside, coiling, cold and dreadful in the pit of your stomach. I'd seen it, felt it, when I'd talked to Kimberly. She didn't show. Get a grip, Lucky. As I stepped into the cab of the elevator, I shook off the odd feeling. Okay, I pushed it aside and tried to ignore it. I had a party to work and a man's arm to grace. So nice for once not to be in charge, to be able to relax and enjoy the fruits of someone else's labor. Amazingly, no one pushed in with me, and I had the elevator to myself as I rode up to the top floor. Teddie and Mona had left me to the media wolves, preferring to be early at the party. Mona loved to stake out the best spot in a room. From there, she would work the party like a well-seasoned debutante. The thought of Mona with the high society crowd made me smile. Teddie's parents wore the blue blood taint, and Mona had put them where they belonged. I wished that kind of moxie, that ability to dissect someone without them realizing it, was genetically transferred, but no such luck. Either that or it had skipped my generation. Either way, I came out on the short end. Pressing my back to the cool metal at the back of the elevator car, I let it hold some of my weight as the doors slid shut, cocooning me inside. I used the quiet to breathe, the smooth ride to make a mental transition from being the lead dancer to a member of the corps. As the elevator slowed, I brushed down my dress, arranged my hair, wiped under my eyes, and relaxed, ready to enjoy the part of the evening where Jean-Charles could showcase his brilliance and I could stay out of the limelight. The doors opened. My luck held. The hall to the restaurant was empty. Visible through the glass doors, a Van Gogh hung on the wall, spotlighted perfectly. The personification of perfection and elegance of execution, like Jean-Charles and his cuisine. Jean-Charles and I had had a bit of a tiff over the painting. Actually, it was the ace up my sleeve that I held until Jean-Charles had capitulated on a few expensive requests. He'd been played, and he'd handled it well. Somehow, we'd managed to be business partners as well as a team in life. I had no idea how we'd dodged the bullets that flew at us from every direction, but we had. The noise of a party in full swing buffeted me as I pushed through the double glass doors fronting the elegant foyer. A few steps to the right and around a corner, then I stepped into the crowd. I loved seeing the Vegas glitterati turned out for a formal gathering. A quick scan of the room confirmed everyone who was anyone, or who thought they were someone, was here, including the political contingent. Not the governor, but some gaming commission members, as well as the mayor of Las Vegas, and a few local politicos. If I remembered correctly, the lieutenant governor had hinted at putting in an appearance. With campaigns ramping up toward next year's elections, he just might. That would make sure we got some press in Carson City and Reno. Never a bad thing. Even though the northern part of the state was further from Vegas than LA, San Diego, and Phoenix, those folks still popped down for a taste of the bright lights. The men looked brilliant in their fitted formal wear. The women, many of them powerful business people in their own right, dressed to showcase figures and surgery, rather than their innate loveliness and quiet competence that made them truly interesting and set them apart. Superficiality, a Vegas thing that didn't make me proud. Most days, I felt like I waited alone in my quest for something a bit more solid than pretty outsides and relationships measured in hours. As Teddie had likened it, Don Quixote and his windmills, considering this was Vegas, where one could try on a different life for the weekend. Excited voices competed with lively tunes from a quartet in the corner. Sinatra, My Way, perfect. Mouth-watering aromas drifted from the kitchen each time a waiter pushed through the swinging doors. The tables and chairs had been hidden away, leaving the expanse of wooden floor open for gathering, dancing, and whatever. Bar tables with high stools ringed the floor, except that the far wall of windows overlooking the glory of the Strip was left unobstructed. The dark green walls, the wooden beams overhead, the brass sconces casting a warm glow, and the wrought iron light fixtures above, each with a tiny flame in glass where a light should be, gave the space the comfort of a French country house, just as Jean-Charles had wanted.
"Food is pleasure," he told me, "to be enjoyed and shared with good friends. I want my customers to feel like friends here."
From the looks of it, he'd accomplished that in spades. Many turned to greet me as I worked my way across the room. Mona and my father were encircled against the far wall of windows, the multicolored lights of the Strip backlighting them. My former assistant, and now the head of customer relations at the Babylon, Miss P., nuzzled her intended, the beautiful Jeremy Whitlock, at a table in the corner. Their wedding was set for Christmas Eve, only a few days from now. It would be the first to be performed at Cielo. Brandy, my assistant, had corralled a few important media types, presumably stroking their egos as she spoon-fed them the story we'd like to see printed. Still no Kimberly Cho. I tried not to be worried, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that tonight was going to be anything but routine. Waiters passed trays of delectables, which I waved away for the moment. Me? Passing up a feeding opportunity? I was either sick or the apocalypse was imminent. I should wear tight clothes more often. Perhaps one day I'd fit comfortably in them, and pigs would fly. The Babylon's head bartender, Sean, appeared at my elbow with a flute of bubbly.
"Schramsberg Rosé. Medicinal. Chef's orders."
That I didn't wave away, thanking him with a smile as he stepped back behind the bar. I spied Jean-Charles across the room and began working my way toward him. The back of a man walking away from me caught my eye. For a brief moment, my heart went cold. Irv Giddings? It couldn't be. An old flame, back when I was young and stupid. The thought of him usually had me reaching for a deadly weapon. One of my proudest accomplishments had been to play a large role in seeing him put behind bars a few months ago. There were nights I fell asleep picturing the problems he would be having in the general prison population. He'd tried to frame the big boss for murder, and then steal the Babylon from him. A capital offense in my book. And this was Nevada, one of the last outposts of the Wild West, where the death penalty was considered fitting punishment. The guy easing out of the kitchen and striding away from me was dressed like Irv used to. A white dinner jacket, with the crested gold buttons glinting on the sleeve as he raised his hand, and a red tie that I could just catch a corner of as he angled away. The cut of the jaw, the arrogance and the exaggerated shoulder-back posture. I narrowed my eyes. No, not Irv. Shorter, maybe, and hair more pepper and less salt than Irv's, but close enough to be spooky. I got a hold of myself. Irv couldn't be here. He was playing games with the inmates at Indian Springs. Jean-Charles was engaged in animated conversation with a couple I didn't recognize when I stepped in next to him. Without missing a beat, he snaked an arm around my waist and pulled me close. Pausing, he introduced me. His fiancée. I never tired of hearing it, and, to be honest, it still shocked and delighted me each time he referred to me that way. With the pleasantries over, he picked up the conversation where he'd left off. Parking my head lightly near his, I let the words recede and my thoughts wander. Just the nearness of him tangled me in places long dormant, if not near dead. Teddie was nowhere to be found. A minor blessing, all things considered. I didn't know why he came anyway. Nothing but bad for him here. He'd left this life. We'd moved on. I'd moved on, despite what my mother said. The unease from my brief talk with Kimberly Cho had lessened to a low thrum, like distant traffic, my joy eclipsing that niggling feeling that something was off. Of course, being bushwhacked by Mona and Teddie hadn't exactly started my evening down a smooth path. Swaying to the music just a bit, making Jean-Charles grin as he tried to concentrate on the people in front of him, sipping my champagne, I began to relax into the joy of life. Big mistake. Tempting fate had never worked out well for me. Detective Romeo materialized at my elbow. Nodding to the others, he leaned in close to my ear. "We have a problem." "Nope," I said, enjoying the happy bubbles that tickled my nose as I took a big sip of my Schramsberg. They tickled and warmed all the way down, settling into a nice pillow of contentment somewhere deep inside. "No, Romeo, we do not have a problem." "Lucky, this is serious. And yes, we have a problem." He tugged on my arm, sloshing a bit of my champagne. After counting to 10, twice, I gave him my full attention. Even though spit and polished in a slim-cut dark suit and Hermes tie, his sandy hair cut and combed, even his recalcitrant cowlick bending to propriety, he looked a little ragged around the edges. His blue eyes dark, his smile absent, a frown puckering the skin between his eyes. He looked at me as a friend, which doused that warmth I'd been enjoying. This was personal. Brandy, my assistant, and his girl, squeezed his arm. Her eyes big as saucers, she remained mute. Not good. As I disengaged from my chef, handing him my glass of champagne, I gave him a reassuring smile. This was his party, his time to shine, and whatever it was Romeo was dragging me into, I'd keep it to myself. Yeah, I'm a dreamer. Weaving through the crowd, I noticed security was guarding the exits. At this point, I doubted anyone wanted to leave, as the party was just getting started, so the fact that they couldn't hadn't yet caused any alarm. "Lucky, come on." Romeo, one hand on the kitchen door, motioned to me with the other. I joined him. "What's going on?" "You are not going to like this." "You always say that." I followed him into the kitchen. 2 steps inside, I stopped in my tracks. "And you're always right." Holt Box lay on the floor, a red stain spreading across his chest, soaking his chef's whites. His face slack, his eyes sightless, his skin losing the ruddy flush of oxygenated blood. Teddie stood over the body, holding a knife. My father pressed to his side, blood on his hands. Chapter 2. For a moment, time stopped. My heart, too. I tried to process the scene in front of me. 2 of Romeo's off-duty guys working security for the party bracketed Teddie and my father and kept everyone else back. Not hard to do, since the kitchen had come to a standstill. Waiters, cooks, and prep staff stood rooted, open-mouthed. Something burned on the stove. Water bubbled in a large pot, billowing steam. I thought I caught the hiss of butter in a hot pan. The roar of a party reaching a crescendo filtered around the swinging doors as they opened and swung back behind me, then opened again, repeating the cycle. "I'm assuming he's dead?" I asked Romeo, my voice a squeak of its normal timbre. A stupid question, really, but with me, hope was the last thing extinguished by reality. Romeo didn't bother to answer. Instead, he started barking orders to the officers who had filled in the tight space behind us, explaining the opening and shutting of the door. Movement restarted. So did my heart, pounding against my chest. My father gave me a tight look and a shrug, which I couldn't interpret. Teddie avoided my eyes, which spoke volumes. Brandy moved in next to me, a vision in a white sheath, her face needing only the lightest touch of makeup to enhance her natural beauty, her long dark hair pulled back, her face tight, her eyes big. I leaned down and spoke softly. Go back to the party, work damage control, get Miss P on board. You two know what to do. Tell Jeremy to meet me at the office later. I'm sure he'll be there anyway. This is going to be a shitstorm of epic proportions. Just the thought made me want to run and hide. A presence loomed behind me, emitting a low, feral growl. The hairs stood on the back of my neck. I turned barely in time to catch his coat tail as Jean-Charles hurtled by me. Whoa, whoa! Digging in my heels, I hung on to him with all I had, using my weight as leverage to stop his considerable momentum. That's a crime scene. You really don't want to go adding your DNA, do you? That stopped him, but I held on, unsure as to whether he'd stay stopped. He raked a hand through his hair as he worked for control. A man in whom emotions ran deep, Jean-Charles had a temper, but the level of sheer hatred I saw in his eyes surprised even me. Love and hate, two passions equally strong, pulling in opposition, like the moon and the sun. His mask fell back in place as he turned and glared at me. I will kill him, he muttered, the tone of his voice leaving no doubt he meant it. I assumed he meant Teddie. Not if I get to him first. The level of joy in the anticipation left me breathless. For the first time, I understood what the bard meant when he said revenge was best served cold. And my father standing there, bloodied and a bit unnerved, sobered me up. Seeing him that way, dear God, he couldn't have had something to do with this, could he? An irrational thought, of course. My father wasn't prone to killing, at least not that anyone had proven. But even if he had that proclivity, why would he kill his prize pony? If Teddie was right, Holt Box was worth millions to the Babylon. Teddie. Somebody get that pan off the stove, Jean-Charles shouted, then turned on his heel and pounded through the swinging door so hard it reverberated off the outside wall. If some hapless soul had been on the other side, Jean-Charles's exit would have doubled tonight's body count. Brandy followed him out, tossing a worried glance back at me over her shoulder as she disappeared. Fetch me a plastic bag large enough to hold that knife, Romeo ordered, extending his hand toward the kitchen staff. Someone managed to locate one, and Romeo held it open in front of Teddie. Put the knife in here. Teddie's eyes found mine. He shook his head slightly, then did as Romeo asked. The knife looked old, with a long, narrow blade, the tip angled only on one side. The metal had a green tinge. I know how it looks, he started. My father elbowed him. Wait, you need a lawyer. His eyes found me. Lucky, will you make the call? I nodded, but the trouble was, I had no idea who to call. We had the requisite team of corporate pit bulls, but none of us had a personal defense attorney. Your mother will know, he added, as if reading my thoughts. Mother? I'd better find her before the news of this mess did. Am I free to go? I asked Romeo, unsure exactly why he wanted me to see the scene in the kitchen. He knew how much I hated dealing with dead people. Holt Box wasn't a personal friend. Hell, he wasn't even an acquaintance. We'd met a couple of times, but that had been years ago. I'd met his wife then, too, but could barely remember her. A slip of a thing, practically mute, but stunning. And I had no idea if he'd kept her or tossed her back, or vice versa. As I turned to go, I stopped, then whirled back around, scanning the room and the small crowd gathered there. My eyes searching, cataloging. Holt Box. Years ago, when I'd been Irv Giddings' arm candy. What is it? Romeo watched me. My lips pinched into a thin line as I took my time, taking in every detail. Nothing seemed amiss. Well, except for poor Mr. Box. Let me think on it. I don't know exactly. Not yet. He nodded like that was a normal thing. That's why I wanted you here, he said, in answer to my unspoken question. Lucky me. Any idea why somebody would want to kill Holt Box? He directed the question to me, but his gaze encompassed my little posse of Teddie and the big boss. Nobody said anything. Even I clammed up, despite being privy to a very damning motive Teddie had, including his admission that he'd like to kill Holt Box. Said in the heat of anger, he hadn't meant it literally. At least that's what I chose to believe. It had come out, but later. Not with an audience who I'm sure was videoing the whole thing on their phones and salivating over being the first to upload it to YouTube. Maybe they'd even cash out with an exclusive to one of the gossip rags. Satisfied no one felt compelled to blurt out an ill-advised comment, I left them to Romeo. Pushing back through the swinging doors, I knew how Dorothy must have felt going to bed in Kansas and waking up in Oz. On this side, everyone partied on, oblivious to homicide in the kitchen only steps away. I snagged 2 flutes of champagne from a passing waiter and slugged one, depositing the empty on his tray. The other I clutched so tight, I risked breaking the stem. My mother held a group of men under her spell. I shouldered my way through until I got her attention. It took squeezing her arm.
Oh, Lucky! How nice. Perhaps you'd care to weigh in on whether we should all admit that 16,000 hookers and 9 vice cops is the equivalent to non-enforcement of the archaic law that makes prostitution a crime in Clark County. Wouldn't it be better to legalize what's already happening here? Collect taxes and protect not only the Johns, but the girls as well?
Prostitution. A divisive topic, even in Vegas. Especially in Vegas. From the clenched jaws and hard eyes of some of the men ringing her, Mona was working on a homicide of her own. All eyes turned in my direction. I felt a drop of sweat trickle down the side of my face. Holding my champagne, I swiped at the drop with the back of my hand. Sex. A potent drug, with the argument for legalization equally as unclear. I grabbed Mona's elbow as I forced a smile. But someone once told me that sex and politics were not topics meant for a cocktail party. I pulled Mother away from her fans.
Lucky, really. If I'm to make any changes in this town, I need to bend some ears, get people to listen.
Not here, not right now.
What's all this about?
Curiously, she didn't adopt her normal huffy tone. In fact, she sounded amused. Maybe her running for office wasn't a bad thing, on top of the whole late-in-life twin thing. Dealing with Mother was like handling a 2-year-old. Keep them busy, keep them tired, and they can't do you any harm. I held a chair for her at a table off to the side in a corner by the window, then joined her. It's Father and Teddie. I lowered my voice and made sure no one was listening. Then I explained the scene in the kitchen. Father said you'd know who to call. Mona sat like a statue, immobile, her smile fixed by fear. Of course. Squash Trenton. I blinked a few times, looking for the punchline. There wasn't one. He's in the book. The color drained from Mona's face. You don't think your father... Of course not. Knowing him, he was trying to help. Unfortunately, someone had already permanently retired Mr. Box. I could say the words, couldn't admit the possibility. Instead, I gave Mother a pointed look that even she was clever enough to read. A hand snaked to her throat. Teddie, she whispered. I leaned back and drained most of my champagne as I looked at the strip through the windows, the lights painting the night sky with bright, fun come-ons, promising loose slots, cheap food, and fun. None of that here. I don't know. Something's not right. I chewed on my lip as I tried to find the way out of the maze without success. Murder didn't mesh with the Teddie I knew. Of course, neither had duplicity and cheating, yet he'd proven both were part of his skill set. I wonder what Teddie has to say for himself. The large atrium-style vestibule of the Clark County Detention Center was virtually empty, which seemed odd for a Saturday night, especially with Christmas so close I could feel it breathing down my neck. Decorated in early institutional, the space held little warmth and hints of fear. A few lonely decorations hung from a string of lights over the intake desk, a token effort and rather bad taste. Even the few plants bent under the weight of hopelessness. My footfalls echoed eerily, like the last walk of the accused. The evening had taken a bit to unravel, but unravel it had. Questioning by police has such a chilling effect on frivolity. The police worked through the guests, taking statements, trying to get a handle on who exactly had come and gone from the kitchen. Not an easy task, and it took time, but with alcohol plentiful and flowing freely, The mood had remained calm and even a bit excited. It's not every day the average upper-crust denizen was invited to a murder, even in Vegas. So, I was later than I'd thought I'd be. I'm sure Squash Trenton had the meter running while he waited. But never having met him, I didn't know what kind of man he was. But he was a lawyer, enough said. I assumed the man chatting up the night staff as he leaned on the counter, his butt toward me, was the lawyer I was looking for. Something he said got a rousing chuckle from his rapt audience. I cleared my throat. Squash finished his joke before he rose and turned. Younger than I thought, I figured he'd be my father's contemporary. He lazily took me in, focusing on parts below my chin, which I'd thrust out in challenge. Red hair, longish, seductively curly. Blue eyes, I was expecting green. Warm, with a laugh lurking. No freckles, they wouldn't dare. A whittled face supported by a strong jaw. By the time he'd finished his visual assessment, I was more than a little steamed, which I think might have been his point, so I tamped it down. "You done?" His eyes rose to meet mine. He didn't apologize. "That is some dress." "So I've been told." Dressed in jeans so old and soft that excepting the seams and stitch lines, they were hardly blue anymore, a pair of topsiders minus the laces, and a t-shirt a tad too tight for his toned and buffed torso. No belt, no socks, no ring. Mr. Trenton didn't seem too upset about being called out on a Saturday night, nor did he seem to be in much of a hurry. "Who am I here to see?" he asked, shrugging into his lawyer manner with the ease of donning a comfortable sweater. Good question. I guess it depends on who they arrested. Romeo had been hip-deep when I'd left what was left of the party. As I'd calmed Mother, keeping her from clawing her way through the cops to get to her husband, and directed Miss P, Brandy, and every staff member I could corral as to how to handle the mushroom cloud of impending publicity fallout, I'd seen him escorting Teddie and my father out through the back entrance. Jean-Charles had been doing damage control as well. I'd wanted to join him, rushed to help, but I had my hands full with my own responsibilities. Such was our life. We both got it, not that we liked it. I felt so alone. More alone than I'd ever been when on my own. Used to being two, his absence cut deeply. As Squash grabbed his jacket, suede, worn to an old shoe comfort, with tattered fringe, he gave the officer behind the counter a quick nod. Apparently, that was the magic signal to unlock the doors. Stepping to the side and sweeping his arm in front of him, he ushered me through the door, then fell into step at my shoulder. I knew where I was going. Romeo met us at Interrogation Room 1, his shoulders slumped under the weight of the murder of a country music icon. I didn't have the heart to tell him the vultures were just beginning to circle. "Your father is free to go." The young detective, with eyes far older than his years, raked a hand through his hair, standing his cowlick at attention. Then he wiped tired eyes. "God, what a shitstorm." Romeo had been a bright-eyed kid when we'd first met, not too long ago. I didn't even want to count the days, mere months, I thought. I knew they shouldn't have been sufficient to age him as they had. "Has Mr. Rothstein been charged with anything?" Squash asked. "No, not yet." At my look, he hastily added, "Most likely not at all. We'll give the evidence to the DA. He'll decide what to take to the grand jury, but I don't see any reason to hold him right now. It's not like he's a huge flight risk." "And Teddie?" "He's going to stay, at the insistence of the great state of Nevada. Lucky? I don't need to tell you. It looks bad." "We'll see about that," Squash said. Romeo grew into his boots as he stared down the attorney. "Take your best shot, counselor. And for the record, we're on the same team. I want to find who killed Holt Box, perhaps even more than you do. But right now, things are pointing to Mr. Kowalski." Squash shifted to all business mode, a tick in his cheek the only hint of the intensity running underneath the surface. "We'll see." Romeo gestured down the hall. "I've had them bring Teddie into one of the attorney conference rooms. He wants to see you," he said to me. Teddie, a turtle without his shell and an orange jail jumpsuit, sat in one of the metal chairs cozied up to the metal table. Exposed, unprotected, he stared down at his hands. Romeo had been kind enough to forego the handcuffs. Looking up, He gave me a slight tick-up of one corner of his mouth when I walked in. "I knew you'd come." His smile, if that's what it was, fled when he caught sight of Squash Trenton behind me. "Who's that?" His voice was flat, lifeless. "Your lawyer." Squash held one of the chairs across from Teddie for me, and then eased into the other one. He held out his hand. "Kirk Trenton. Folks call me Squash. Mr. Rothstein asked that I offer my services." He cocked an eyebrow at me. "The big boss says he's the best," I confirmed, as I glanced around the room. No camera, no one-way glass. Teddie looked like he would have laughed if the circumstances were different. "You really want me to hire a lawyer named Squash?" "If he earned it in the courtroom, then not a bad thing." I tried to adopt a hopeful tone. "How did you earn that nickname?" I asked the lawyer. He ignored me. I turned back to Teddie. The big boss would know who's the best. He'd had his share of legal scrapes, although so long ago, Squash probably wasn't even a gleam in his mother's eye. But my father kept his finger on the pulse. If anyone would know, he would. Teddie's face shut down in resignation as he looked at Squash. He didn't want a lawyer, didn't want to need one. That much was obvious. But nobody promised we'd get what we wanted. "You going to get me out of here?" "I'll give it a shot," Squash said, as he cocked his head and evaluated Teddie with the narrow-eyed savvy of a bettor gauging a racehorse. "First-degree murder isn't normally a bailable offense in Nevada, but you tell me what happened, and I'll find someone who can strong-arm the DA. That would be me, but I didn't say so. The Clark County District Attorney, Daniel Lovato, known as Lovey to his friends and enemies alike, owed me big time. Like, kept his ass out of jail big time. Nice to hold his marker, and I wasn't completely convinced this was the time to play it. Not yet, and not for Teddie. Teddie. Curiously, the anger and the hurt had fled, only to be replaced by worry so strong it made my heart race and my breath come in shallow gasps. Not exactly what I'd been hoping for. Teddie could be a self-absorbed ass for sure. He'd proven that on multiple occasions. But a killer? That was taking things to a whole other level, one I tried to picture, but something in my heart wouldn't let me. As if my body was conspiring against my brain, my gut also weighed in, siding with my heart. So heart and gut voted to acquit, but my brain wasn't so sure. Ever at war with myself. Nothing new there, and no winner. Of course, it didn't matter what my body parts were telling me. Teddie's fate hinged on what we could prove. "I didn't kill him, for what it's worth." Teddie shivered, his confidence leaking from him like a trickle of water through a dam. With time, it would erode the structure from the inside until the whole thing crumbled. "Even I know that motive, means, and opportunity usually seal the deal, and I got all three." Teddie finished, staring at his hands as he tapped them softly on the table. Squash leaned forward. "You've been watching too much television." He turned to me. "I'll have to ask you to go. Anything Teddie says with you here can't be protected under attorney-client privilege." I rose to do as he ordered, my chair scraping back across the floor with the nerve-grating screech of fingernails on a blackboard. Teddie reached out and grabbed my wrist, stopping me. "The weapon, Lucky. Whatever it was, it's unique, old. Maybe you can find out where it came from." As I loomed over him, I wondered how we had come to this. "You didn't carry it in there?" "No." Emphatic, not a trace of waver in his eyes. "No one gave it to you?" "Of course not. I gave you a hug. If I'd had that thing, surely you would have felt it." He had a point. He'd held me close to him, tight. I remembered every inch where our bodies connected. He let go of my wrist, the flare of fight gone. "I've been a fool in so many ways." He waited until I looked at him. "Although I've not been the man you wished I was, I promise you, I'm not the man you think I am." Chapter 3. Romeo held up the wall in the hallway. He looked up when I stepped out of the room. Hands in his pockets, he used a shoulder to lever himself upright, then walked in my direction. "Anything useful?" he asked. "Says he didn't do it." A chill shivered through me. I readjusted my pashmina, which had slipped from my shoulders to my forearms, wrapping it tighter. He promised. Romeo was kind enough not to point out Teddie had made promises before and broken them. "Do you believe him?" Romeo had to ask, even though he knew me well enough to know I'd give Teddie every possible benefit of the doubt. Despite everything, I do. I wondered briefly where my limits were with Teddie. So far, I'd bent to the point of breaking. "Did he tell you about the contract the big boss pulled, then gave the venue to Holt Box?" "Yeah. Not looking good for him. You know that, don't you?" Concern warmed the young detective's voice. With nothing to say, I shrugged. Romeo looked pained, like he wished he could run and hide. I knew the feeling. "I want to believe him too, but that doesn't change what I have to do. You remember, it's not what we think, it's what we can prove," I finished for him, as I'd done so many times before. Nothing like bonding over dead bodies to solidify a friendship. "So, let's start proving he didn't do it. Any idea why someone would want to kill Holt Box, besides Teddie?" "I've got my guys digging." Romeo rubbed the back of his neck, then rotated his head as if on a swivel, loosening tension. "Nothing so far." "Did Teddie tell you why he went into the kitchen? It's not like him to go looking for a fight in such a public venue." That's the thing that struck me the oddest about the whole situation. Teddie hadn't been drunk. No one had goaded him, at least not that I knew about. Bracing someone in the middle of a chaotic kitchen wasn't his style. Not that he had a style when it came to murder, but you know what I mean. "You know the guy he keeps talking about? The one in the white dinner jacket with the gold buttons?" Romeo paused for my nod. "The Irv Gibbs look-alike?" "What?" Romeo said, clearly not following. "Something about him reminded me of old Irv. I know, weird, but Irv used to dress that way. White dinner jacket, red bow tie. Random thought, don't mind me. My past haunted me from time to time." "Teddie said that guy, your Giddings look-alike, came up to him and whispered that somebody wanted to see him in the kitchen." "Who?" "You." I reared back as if he'd slapped me, which he sorta had. "You know I didn't." Romeo held up his hand. "Never a doubt. I'm just telling you what Teddie said." "We need to find the guy in the dinner jacket." I pointed out the obvious. I didn't have anything else. Grasping at straws made me feel better. "No luck so far. I'm hoping Jerry has something on the security tapes." "What about the murder weapon?" I could picture Teddie telling me to check it out. The memory sent a chill through me. "This is real, isn't it?" I asked Romeo. He gave me an awkward hug. "We'll figure it out. Don't worry." He stepped away and back into detective mode. "The murder weapon is being processed into evidence." "Can you give me a look?" Raised in the wilds of Pahrump, Nevada, and my mother's whorehouse, I knew a few things about weapons. "Sure. Wait here." He stepped to the door, pulled on the handle, and then stepped back, holding it open for someone on the other side. My father, accompanied by a uniformed officer, stepped through, buttoning the sleeve of a fresh shirt. Apparently, he'd summoned a Babylon clerk to bring him a new set of clothes. Romeo spoke softly to the officer, who listened, then turned and followed the detective back through the doorway, both of them disappearing and the door closing behind them. My father looked like himself, his cool and control back in place as he reached for a smile, but subtle lines of stress bracketed his mouth and worry clouded his eyes. "Hell of a thing, this." He gave me a hug, holding me tight. "How's your mother?" Shorter than me by a head, he still gave good hugs. I didn't linger in his embrace. Fatigue and fear eroded my control. His hug would do the rest if I let it. I needed my strength for a bit longer. For me, for Teddie. I eased away, putting a bit of distance between us. "Holding up?" I dropped her by the hotel on my way here. She took some convincing, but I told her she couldn't do anything and would only make things worse. And then there were the babies. She couldn't just run off. I'm sure she's apoplectic by now, though. "You haven't heard from her?" My father seemed amazed, and with good reason. It was a wonder she hadn't called out the National Guard or something. Frankly, I was surprised Mona hadn't at least gotten the governor out of bed and down here to fix things. I turned off my phone. My father grimaced, anticipating my future. Long-term pain for short-term gain. The worst she can do is kill me. My father graced me with a smile. Oh, child, that's far from the worst she can do. He was learning. We shared a moment of familial bonding. What did Teddie tell you happened? I asked him, since I'd been ushered out of the first-hand telling. Something I understood, but I'd love to watch Teddie's face, look into his eyes while he recounted his evening. Of course, my incredible powers of deduction and intuition had let me down before. Grabbing my elbow lightly, my father steered me toward the entrance. Not here. Those words, acid on the steel of my resolve. My knees grew a little wobbly. Teddie couldn't have done it. Could he? I eased my elbow free. I'm waiting for Romeo. He's going to give me a look at the murder weapon. Paolo's outside if you'd like to wait. Romeo was terrified of my father. Things would go better if he weren't peering over my shoulder, making Romeo feel the need to posture, as threatened men are wont to do. As if my father could read my mind, he nodded and went to the entrance to claim his things. I hoped Paolo had remembered to stock the single malt. If he hadn't, he'd be looking for a new job tomorrow, until the big boss found his smile and rehired him. Romeo didn't leave me cooling my heels for long. Here it is. Already logged in to preserve the chain of evidence for the trial, the knife was secured in a thick plastic bag, lighter than it looked, made of metal with a patina dark and old. The blade long and thinner than most knives, the business end had been sharpened to a single edge terminating in a long point. The other end had a small wooden handle. My eyes met Romeo's. What is this? Any idea? Unusual for a normal blade. Old, too, from the looks of it. I spread the plastic so I could see the metal more clearly. I leaned close. Scratches in the patina on the edges. I pulled my iPhone out of my evening bag. Mind if I take some photos? Go for it. I photographed and then recorded the dimensions as best I could. You know what this looks like? A bayonet. Romeo pursed his lips. From an old rifle? How would you know that? I looked at the blade. 1859. The year was right. I had a sinking feeling. I flipped the blade over. G.G. I knew it. Gresham Giddings, the patriarch of the Giddings line. His statue atop a horse graced the grounds of some Capitol building in the South. I hadn't bothered to remember which one. I have a good idea where this came from. My tone indicated I wasn't happy about it, which I wasn't. Romeo's head jerked up, his pupils dilated. What? Irv Giddings was the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and I was the only one who saw him. I knew a guy once who had a rifle he was very proud of, a family heirloom, rich with tradition and tales of daring do, to hear him tell it. You always have a guy you once knew. Romeo thought that funny. Then he sobered. Be thankful you didn't have to live through my bad choices. I gave him a look intended to shut him up. Remember Irv Giddings? His eyes bugged. Shit, really? Isn't he in jail? A girl shoved out of a tour helicopter and landing in the middle of the pirate show in front of T.I. had brought Romeo and me together, and together we had put Irv Giddings in jail for it, which is where I thought he still resided. As far as I know, but it wouldn't hurt to check. In my gut, I knew the answer, but I wasn't ready to accept it or believe it just yet. As if the metal had suddenly grown hot in my hands, I tossed the bayonet back to Romeo. When you get the crime scene stuff from the coroner, can you forward the photos and measurements to me? He caught it and looked at it with renewed enthusiasm. Enthusiasm I didn't share. I'd put Irv where he belonged once. Romeo seemed to be thinking the same thing. When his eyes met mine, they were dark and angry, his smile a memory. You got it. And when the text finished with the crime scene, I didn't need to elaborate. We'd worked together long enough for a bit of verbal shorthand. The full report? You got it. He turned to go, then paused. And what are you going to do? With Irv in jail, his hotel gone, and his apartment and hotel foreclosed on, I'm going to try to figure out what happened to his gun collection, who bought it, where it went. And how this, Romeo held up the bayonet, could have ended up buried in Holt Box's stomach. Precisely. And I want you to figure out who other than Teddie might have wanted Holt Box dead. The wife might be able to help with that. A good place to start. But in the meantime, let's shake some trees and see what falls out. Maybe his manager, his PR person. His wife has been his manager for years. His PR firm is in LA. A gal by the name of Kimberly Cho handles his account. I grabbed his arm. She was the one at the party. What one at the party? Romeo clearly wasn't following. She came up to me in the lobby before my interview. She wanted to talk to me. She was scared. What did she want to talk about? I don't know exactly. She warned me to be careful. About what? A man. I remembered her expression, her warning. Which man? I don't know. She said he was someone she'd known from before. I tried to remember her exact words. She told me to be careful. That's all. I felt a horrible, sinking feeling, that disappointment in myself. I didn't have the time to talk right then. She was going to catch me after the interview, but she never showed. How do you know her? She handles PR for lots of folks, big names. She's doing some work for us in Macau. Romeo pulled out his pad and flipped through the pages, shaking his head. She wasn't at the party. His eyes met mine. Or she left before talking with anyone at Metro. How do you know her? The big boss has a large operation in Macau that is scheduled to come online next year. The thing has been a morass of cultural clashes and palm greasing. Kimberly knows her way around Macau, knows the right people to get things done. She's been incredibly helpful. Romeo slowly folded his notebook closed, stuffing it back in his pocket. Lost in thought, it took him 3 tries. Do you have any idea where she might have gone? I thought for a moment. Yes, I think I might. Paolo waited nervously by the car. He seemed unscathed as he opened the back door and ushered me inside, so he must have remembered the single malt. My father lounged, head back, legs extended in front of him, a crystal double old-fashioned glass cradled in both hands on his lap. "What do you think?" he asked, knowing I had no more answers than he did, perhaps fewer. "I'm trying not to." I pointed at the glass in his hands. "Pour me one of those." He handed me his, then leaned forward to pour another. "Tell me what Teddie said," I asked, as I popped off my shoes. Even the flats killed my feet. My father raised the privacy window and made sure the intercom was off, as Paolo settled behind the wheel. His Old Spice cologne filled the small space. Teddie wore Old Spice. Fuck. I sucked down half the scotch. It burned its way down, then exploded white-hot in my belly, but it couldn't dissipate the chill of dread permeating deep to my bones. My father didn't speak right away. I didn't know whether that was good or bad, but I knew not to press. Paolo eased the big car out of the parking lot, leaving the darkness behind as he aimed the machine toward the bright lights of the strip. "I've been going over and over the whole sequence of events, and I just can't make sense of it," my father began, his voice husky, roughed up by the grit of emotion and the medicinal sting of the scotch. Moving down in the seat, pressed by the weight of worry, I lay my head back and closed my eyes, letting his story unfold over me. "Teddie found me pretty quick. He'd been into the booze. I could smell it on him. But he appeared himself under control, modulated, so I figured the liquor was just enough to put a mouth on him and give him a bit too much courage. I didn't think he'd do anything stupid." "Stupid? You mean like kill someone?" I didn't try to hide the snark. Had my father been a bit more aware, all of this could have been avoided. Of course, put in his position, would any of us have thought Teddie would kill? You think you know somebody. My father shot me a look. I didn't have to see it. I could feel it. Father-daughter connections. Aren't they wonderful? I'll be quiet. Let you finish. "How did you—" He slurped from his glass. "Never mind. You and your mother terrify me sometimes. Anyway, as I was saying, Teddie clearly wanted to chew on me over the whole Holt Box thing. We both knew I was within the letter of the contract, but I didn't think it would hurt to give him a shot at me, make him feel better." Although I found fault in his logic, it still shouldn't have led to murder. "By the way, what you did, the contract thing, it doesn't make me proud." "It was legal," my father said, as if hiding behind the law could clear one's conscience. I didn't need to tell him that was a dead end. "You dangled a carrot, knowing Teddie would do anything to get it. You had all the power. He's a singer, not a tough guy. And just because it's legal doesn't make it right." His sigh spoke volumes. "No, it doesn't. If it helps, I'm not proud of myself either. In some way, I must have been punishing him. Clearly, I didn't understand that at the time." "Punishing him? For what he did to me? Don't make this my fault." "Well, I'm not the one on trial here." He threw the words at me. "But curiously, in all of this, you're the one feeling guilty." I thought about sipping more scotch, but that meant I'd have to raise my head and open my eyes, and that would make all of this real. Anyway, Teddie's story? "I let him have his say about everything. The contract, you, me. The guy unloaded. He was angry, sure, but in control. I put him off. Told him I didn't have anything to do with his personal life. That was between you two." Pretty much a lie. My father paused. I could feel the heat of his anger spike, but he didn't argue. "As to the contract, I gave him the old tired story about trying to find a solution, an alternative." Part of me wanted to hear what Teddie had to say about me, but the part of me that didn't won. "What did he say to that?" "He wasn't interested. Said he had another gig lined up." My heart sank. His tour. He was going back on tour. Now that horse had been shot out from under him. And then? Then Benton shouldered in. You know Benton? Head of the gaming commission? Yeah. He wanted to bend my ear about putting some tables and machines in Cielo. I told him he was talking to the wrong person. Vegas. Still a good old boy town, even if it wasn't still run by the wise guys. We'd only chatted for a few minutes. Over his shoulder, I saw Teddie making for the kitchen. It took me a minute to put together exactly what he meant to do. And what was that? There were two men in there he probably hated equally. I wasn't sure which one he might be after, but I thought it wise I'd take a look. His voice was taut with emotion when he said, "You have to believe me. I had no idea he'd try to kill one of them." I wouldn't have jumped to that conclusion either. That seemed to placate my father. His voice settled. I excused myself from my conversation, and I followed him. The ice clinked in his glass as he took another hit. By the time I pushed through the door, Holt Box was slumped in Teddie's arms. What was Teddie doing? Shouting for help. No one had noticed anything? The kitchen was on overdrive. Everyone was busy with their own tasks, in their own world. I knew exactly how it would be. His reputation on the line with each dish. Jean-Charles was a tyrant in the kitchen. His staff, highly trained and equally anal retentive when it came to quality, would have been lost in their perfectly choreographed dance, their own piece of the symphony. Jean-Charles didn't miss his new sous chef? Jean-Charles wasn't in the kitchen. His executive chef was. What's his name? Ronaldo. Yes, Ronaldo was running the show while his boss worked the room. Did you notice anything else? Anyone standing around watching? Things got sort of crazy after that. Teddie did say there was a man in a white dinner jacket, which I thought odd and dismissed. Everybody in the kitchen wore a white coat of some kind, but Teddie was very insistent. Did he happen to mention the dinner jacket had gold buttons? My father's sharp intake of breath told me he had. How did you know? My blood froze. I saw the guy, just from the back. In a way, he reminded me of Irv Gibbs. My father choked, then spluttered and coughed. Scotch going down the wrong pipe was painful. I sat up, then pounded him on the back, while he tried to suck in some air. Finally, he got control. Pulling a handkerchief out of his inside jacket pocket, he dabbed at his eyes. Are you okay? He nodded. Then, when his eyes caught mine, he slowly shook his head. Irv Giddings got out of jail 2 days ago. What? Air rushed out of me as if I'd been sucker punched, which I sorta had. Blindsided, more like. But a few pieces of the puzzle seemed to be lining up. Knowing Irv, I knew enough to reserve judgment. He was full of surprises and quite good at the sleight of hand, leaving someone else to shoulder the blame for what he did. I bolted the rest of my scotch, bringing tears to my eyes. And you didn't tell me because... Your mother and I thought it best not to spoil the party, the opening, all of that. Besides, you haven't really been all that available. He knew I'd come like a dog when he called. Padding a weak argument just made it look even weaker. But Irv was out of jail. Somehow I'd missed that tidbit, and beating my father over the head with it wouldn't help spring Teddie or find the real killer. I'd start with Irv Giddings. A protective undercurrent crept into my father's tone. A bit late, but nobody asked me.
You need to be careful. Irv certainly could have you in his sights.
As analogies went, that one was pretty spot on. Now you tell me?
He got out on a technicality with the help of a dirty judge. Daniel was apoplectic. We both thought he'd keep his nose clean, at least for a while.
Daniel, as in Lovato, the district attorney. I'd known him all my life and still wasn't sure which side of the fence he preferred. Guess that's the way it goes with attorneys who turn to politics. Irv was out. I needed to talk to Daniel about that. But right now, there was nothing I could do about it, so I dropped it. Okay, you walked into the kitchen, saw Teddie holding Holt Box, and what happened next?
I rushed to help. When we lowered Box to the floor, the knife came out in Teddie's hand. There was blood everywhere. Box was already gone.
My father sounded relieved to be talking about homicide rather than Irv Giddings. I got that. Irv was a far bigger problem. I closed my eyes and assumed my previous position, head back and trying not to think about past mistakes. How much blood?
You saw? His shirt was soaked. Blood had run all over his hands and forearms. It had pooled on the floor.
If Teddie had just stabbed him. I let the thought hang. My father didn't need to be led by the nose. But it took him a beat or two longer than I expected.
There wouldn't have been that much blood. At least I don't think there could have been, even if the knife had hit something vital.
A positive idea to hang my hope on. That's something we can take up with the coroner.
Did you call Squash?
Yeah, he's on the case.
Then leave this up to him. You're not thinking right about Teddie and all this. It would be best if you left it alone. You could screw this up rather than make it better.
That brought me upright, my eyes open wide as they clapped on my father, pinning him in my glare. I am so sick and tired of you and Mother telling me what I'm not thinking right about. I raised my voice enough that Paolo shot a big-eyed glance my way in the rearview mirror. I withered him with a glare until he focused on his driving. I will not let a friend rot in jail because I did nothing.
You think you're better than the police?
Please, we're talking about Metro, and you and I both know I can come through in a pinch. I'd saved my father's ass a time or two. He was smart enough to shut up. And if you think about it, had you and Mother not meddled in my life in the first place, perhaps none of this would have happened.
I see your point.
Curiously, my father didn't sound like he was patronizing me. Great. You two learned a lesson, and Teddie pays the price. I scrolled through my contacts in my phone, found the one I wanted, and dialed. Dane answered on the first ring. I've got something I need you to do. Chapter 4. Even though it was pushing toward 10 p.m., my office was a beehive of activity, everyone at their battle stations when I pushed through the doors. Animated chatter filled the air, red lights on the phone blinking as callers held. All the lines were busy. Miss P, sitting at her former desk in the front office, held the phone against her ear with a shoulder. She gave me a quick glance. I waited until she had finished, then handed her my phone. I turned it off. Would you mind? She grabbed it, then pressed the on button. We're already getting calls from Europe, death threats from Texas, and sobbing females unable to talk, and it's just beginning. It is juicy stuff. I can only imagine the lies they will fabricate, if that's not redundant. My heart hurt for Teddie. The media would mercilessly tear into every corner of his life, only to publish half-truths and innuendo. Bad news sells. Miss P stopped for a moment. News. She gave a derisive little laugh and a shake of her head. I knew what she was thinking. What passes for news these days, in truth, has little resemblance. Gossip sells. The more salacious, the more tawdry, the better. Doesn't matter if it's true or not. Some wiseacre once said, all publicity is good publicity. He was either stupid or way too optimistic. I'm sure Teddie would gladly trade places. Want me to take a phone? We're just giving them all the standard line. We can't say anything as it is an ongoing investigation. So far, we've been able to keep up. Jeremy's waiting in your office. Why don't we just automate the answering with a recording to that effect? Then those who need our help couldn't get through. I looked at all the lines lit up and blinking. They can't now. I turned to go. A thought stopped me mid-stride. The shooter show. How's that going? Any problems? One of the world's largest gun shows currently occupied most of the larger venues in town, with the aficionados filling most of the rooms. Regardless of how one felt about gun ownership, the annual convention was a huge draw and a financial boon to the city. The Babylon hosted the sales pavilion and the antique portion of the show. Miss P gave me her full attention. No complaints that I know of. Why? Tomorrow is opening day? Yes, we have it under control. She gave me a measuring look. And how about you? The holiday party for the whales? Need any help? On my list of things to put finishing touches on today. We'll be ready. Thankfully, we have a couple of days. I'm not at the top of my game. Every year, we had a holiday celebration for our whales, our betters that kept $100 million on deposit with the house to fund their gaming activities. We had 40. Our operation in Macau, despite undergoing a major expansion, had 400. It didn't take a crystal ball to see where our corporate energies needed to be applied, but that was a continuing discussion with the big boss. He wanted me to spend some time overseeing operations there. I didn't. And, Miss P said, stopping me as I turned toward my office, you are the honorary starter for the elf run on Christmas Eve morning. Do you want me to cancel? A citywide event eagerly anticipated by locals and holiday visitors alike. Christmas in Vegas normally didn't attract a huge crowd. We weren't exactly family-friendly. Christmas was usually seen as just a blip in the run-up to New Year's debauchery, except for the elf run. To be honest, I'd forgotten. Don't cancel. I would say something stupid here like life goes on, but even I'm not that banal, despite my cliché addiction. Clearly, even though charging around at full throttle, I was unable to keep all the plates spinning. Thank you for that. I'm hurt. The banter helped me find true north again. Life had been wobbling off track, and I was glad to have my feet pointed down the trail. Teddie's problems had solutions. We just had to find them. What time is the race again? I cringed, awaiting the answer. Race starts promptly at 7. They ask that you be there by 6:30. A.M.? Mornings were not my friend, and lately I'd noticed a profound immunity to caffeine. The more I relied on it, the less effective it was. Like my mother. Why do people want to run? And it's such an ungodly hour. For fun? And health? Aren't we supposed to drink for our health? Milk? I hated milk. I'll keep my vices. They make me happy, and happiness is good for my health. Before she could shoot a hole in my justifications, I retreated. Out of habit, I started toward my old office, now Miss P's, then rerouted. With her at her old desk out front, she'd thrown me off. Perhaps we were both having a tough time adjusting to the new musical offices thing. Old habits. My new office looked a lot like my old office, just larger, in a different location, and still under construction. I'd gotten so used to the 2 guys with 1 hammer crew who came each day to entertain me with their lackluster finish-out efforts and creative excuses that I wouldn't know what to do when they actually finished. Adoption was a possibility. That or find them a stand-up gig. My burled walnut desk anchored the room, and me. My ship on the stormy seas. 2 chairs fronted it. The walls were bare, but for some paint splotches, as I tried to decide which color suited me. A difficult proposition, as my choice changed with my mood. And right now, I was favoring something dark and dismal. Jeremy, his tux wrinkled, his tie undone, lay on my couch, 1 arm across his eyes. I took a moment to enjoy the view. Over 6 feet of well-muscled Aussie, with gold-flecked eyes and wavy brown hair, the beautiful Mr. Whitlock was indeed serious eye candy. And once he trotted out that delectable accent, truly swoon-worthy. The fact that he loved Miss P beyond measure, a woman 15 years his senior at that, put his perfect male score off the charts. She was one lucky gal. My desk chair squeaked as I sat, then towed open a lower drawer, put my feet on it, and leaned back. Jeremy's body twitched, the only hint he was aware of my presence. "You okay?" he asked. "Been better, thanks." I reached for my version of worry beads, a paperweight on the corner of my desk, lucite encasing a golden cockroach. It had been a gift from the hotel staff after I dealt with a particularly odious guest intent on loosing thousands of the bugs.
"What can I do to help?"
Jeremy eased his legs around, putting his feet on the floor as he levered himself to a seated position, then speared me with those eyes as he flashed his dimples. His wavy hair, mussed from the impromptu nap, begged to have fingers run through it. Good thing I was genetically hardwired to not go play in someone else's sandbox, but I had no idea how he fended off the hordes of less principled women. I motioned him closer. Then I remembered I needed my phone. I buzzed Miss P. "On my way with your phone." I'd quit asking her long ago how she could anticipate my every need, but it still creeped me out a bit. Breezing through the doorway, a cloud of chiffon and fresh floral scent, she stopped next to the desk. "Here you go." She held out my phone. 20 messages from your mother. I assume by now she is either dead or has found someone else to shoot. Several from a few of the reporters who have your personal number. And an odd one." "Odd? How so?" I took my phone, not so sure I wanted it. A strange sort of chuckle, then a hang-up. "Male or female?" "Male. I left the message on there. Maybe you can recognize the voice." Jeremy and Miss P huddled closer as I pressed play. Short, low, with a hint of madness, the chuckle was worthy of a Halloween spook house, giving me goosebumps. "You recognize him?" Miss P asked, angling a look at me over the top of her cheaters. "Can't be sure, but did you know Irv Gibbs was released from prison a few days ago?" Shocked looks from both of them answered that question.
"Pretty light sentence for murder,"
Jeremy said. "Apparently, he got out on a technicality, and something about a judge on the take. I plan to take it all up with the DA.
"Wish I could be a fly on that wall,"
Miss P mumbled as she tore the top sticky note off the stack on my desk. I handed her a pen.
"You'll want to see him first thing."
She didn't even pretend she expected an answer as she made a note to herself. "Don't bother. Tomorrow is Sunday. I know where to find him." She tore off the sheet of paper she'd been scribbling on, wadded it up, and launched it across the room at the trash can. A swish. I focused on Jeremy. "Find him. Find Irv Gibbs."
"Anything to go on?"
"Start with the phone number from the message." I scribbled it on a notepad, tore off the sheet, and handed it to him. I stared into the paperweight, as if looking into a crystal ball, hoping to divine answers. No such luck. His trail went cold when he became a ward of the state. My bet would be to start with known associates, that sort of thing.
But you're the pro. "I'll run the number, but I'd be willing to bet that's a burner phone, a dead end. But forward me a copy of the message. I'll see if I can pull anything that might help from the tape. I'll try the facial recognition software too. Any security tapes from Cielo tonight?"
I grimaced. My stomach hurt. High-octane scotch on raw flesh with no food to protect it. "Security is minimal there right now. We're not open yet. Still working out the kinks in the system, but ask Jerry what he has." The head of security at the Babylon, Jerry had been helping me refine the security system at Cielo. With no gaming on the premises, Cielo's security wasn't as sophisticated or refined as the system at the Babylon, but maybe he had something that might help. Maybe you could get a bead on Kimberly Cho as well. I gave him the skinny of our disappearing PR agent. Jeremy stood. Stepping behind his chair, he held the back in both hands.
"What about the prison? Maybe he said something to a cellmate?"
"I'll take care of that. I am at the top of ol' Irv's hit list. Maybe somebody might like to tell me how much he hated me and what he planned to do about it." Saturday night, the energy level at the Babylon at full throttle. I decided to swing by security to see if I could catch Jerry. The man worked almost as much as I did, so the odds were good. I fielded a couple of texts from Jean-Charles. Having someone check on me was a new thing. I think I liked it. No, I did like it. It just took some getting used to. We'd meet back at his restaurant when I'd finished with Jerry, if I found him. Jerry kept the main room and security dark, so after stepping inside, I needed a moment for my eyes to adjust. Monitors tic-tac-toed the far wall, each showing different views of the gaming tables, the players, the dealers, and a bird's-eye view where experts could watch the hands dealt and the players' movements, looking for a card drawn from the bottom or one pulled from the sleeve, and all the more subtle tricks I didn't want to know about or think of. Other clusters of monitors huddled in groupings around the large room, each showing different parts of the hotel, and each monitored by one staff member. Safety, not only for the house's money, but also for those who donated to the cause, was a top priority. My luck held. Jerry, his back to me, his hands clasped behind him, his feet spread, watched the ever-changing landscapes in front of him. He tossed me a sideways glance as I stepped in beside him.
Man, bad stuff tonight.
The stale smell of cigarettes clung to him, which always intrigued me, given the big boss had turned every square inch of the hotel into a non-smoking environment. Scratch that. The great state of Nevada, with local assistance, had pulled off that bit of illogic. Like hot dogs and mustard, gambling without smoking just wasn't the full experience. The men groused, but the ladies in their Dolce and Chanel No. 5 on the way to a fancy evening loved the new, perfumed Vegas. I still straddled the fence. Jerry and I had worked together so long, we were family. When I'd had problems with the big boss, I'd turn to Jerry. When Teddie had taken a powder, Jerry had been the one to help me put my pieces back together. Tall and thin, with dark skin, a bald pate that he shaved and waxed, a bright, infrequent smile, and tired written all over him, Jerry still wore yesterday's suit and today's problems. He ran a hand over his head, a habit ingrained long before the hair had departed. "They ever let you go home?" I nudged him with a shoulder.
No reason to. Wife's out of town.
"And you decided to wallow in a vice or two while she's gone?"
That bad?
Ooh, de ashtray. Not sure you want to go hang with my mother. She'll make you wish those cancer sticks had already killed you. I didn't understand, in light of all we knew, why people kept smoking. Of course, I often overindulged in my affinity for wild turkey, so crawling up on a soapbox would subject me to the same scrutiny. Not a good plan, considering my collection of vices was as big as my backside. Jerry took the last pull on the cigarette he'd been holding at his side, then mashed it out in his hand.
I avoid your mother at all costs.
I cringed. Wise man. Doesn't that hurt? He gave me a look.
What, avoiding your mother?
People and their habits. He really didn't know. Never mind. I watched the flickering images on the array of screens. Even on a Saturday night, inching towards Sunday morning, folks were drinking and letting their bets ride. Did Romeo find you?
Oh, yeah. He's been calling me every 10 minutes or so.
As if on cue, Jerry's phone at his hip rang. He tilted it up, looked at the number, then showed it to me before directing the call to voicemail.
See?
It's Teddie's ass on the line. A hard thought to swallow, even harder to say. Sorta ups the ante.
Yeah.
Jerry switched to all business.
I had a few cameras working at Cielo. We're going through the tapes now. Got a hit on the guy in the white dinner jacket with a red bow tie and gold buttons. A short clip in the lobby. You want to see it?
My heart tripped, then raced. Seriously?
Veronica?
He called. One of his techs looked up, her face painted an interesting cascade of colors by the screen in front of her.
Cue up the feed and roll it to my office.
A small cubicle defined by walls of glass on 3 sides, so Jerry could have privacy and still monitor his fiefdom. Jerry's office was barely large enough for both of us, and his desk, too. He turned the monitor around so we could both see. I leaned against the wall, my feet thankful for the easing of their load. My job took its toll. If I didn't change my ways, I'd work myself into a motorized scooter and a permanent ticket to rehab. A few blinks and sputters, then the screen leapt to life. The lobby of Cielo, people milling.
There.
Jerry pointed to a white splotch. A man, half hidden by a potted palm. He was watching someone. I followed the direction of his gaze. He was watching me. Shit. He took a phone call, standing there a minute longer. The other people in the frame moved, greeting friends, collecting for the interview I'd given, or filtering toward the elevators. Everyone looked happy, normal, except one. Kimberly Cho. She stared at the man in the white jacket and looked as if she'd seen a ghost. The man terminated his call, then looked up at the camera with a chilling smile, keeping half of his face hidden. The feed ended, capturing him in freeze frame. I stared at the image. An Asian version of Irv Giddings, especially dressed as Irv always had. I could see why I thought he might have been that nightmare from the past when I first glimpsed him. Dark hair, slicked back, a simian brow, small eyes, and a mean mouth above a weak chin. What about the cameras in the service area? Jerry gave a hacking, phlegmy cough. You're killing yourself. He doubled over for a moment, fighting for breath. The spasms passed. His eyes teared as he looked at me. I know. I wondered what I could say that would make him hear. At a loss, I gave up. The surface area cameras? Not working. That feed went down just as the crowd was gathering. Still not sure what happened. I pointed to the image now frozen on the screen. He happened. You want a shot of him, I'm guessing. Jerry fingered a pack of cigarettes, then flicked them aside. It's pretty blurry and only a half-face shot. Not going to be much help. I'd really like a shot at him, but for now, one of him will have to do. Chapter 5. News of a celebrity murder travels fast. The Holt Box faithful were beginning to gather, even though we'd almost turned the corner into a new day. Candles, flowers, cards, stuffed animals, expressions of grief clustered to the side of the main entrance of Cielo. The police had cordoned off the drive and manned a checkpoint, checking people in and out. A serious-faced youngster, playing dress-up as a Metro cop, leaned over to peer inside. No privacy with the top down. May I help you? Lucky O'Toole. I own this place. Well, along with several banks and a hedge fund, but you get my drift. Some identification, please. You really think some bad guy is going to roll up here in a fire engine red with the top down? I'd let Paolo go home at the end of his shift, and had borrowed a car from the Ferrari dealership in the hotel. You'd be surprised. And discouraged, I muttered as I dug through my Birkin, an extravagant gift from the big boss. I'd abandoned my evening purse, a small showpiece short on functionality. Everything important seems to hide at the bottom. My hand brushed the butt of my Glock that I'd tossed in at the last minute. My father told me never to carry a gun unless I was ready to use it. I was ready, and wishful. The cop seemed nonplussed by my explanation, and steadfast in his demand. A few curious Holt Box devotees, as identified by their T-shirts in garish hot pink and gold, took an interest and wandered over. One guy snapped a few photos, doing little to help my abysmal mood. If tonight got any worse, I would hop the next jet to anywhere. If only I could find my credit card and ID. My hand closed around my wallet. Aha! I shouted, as if I'd discovered the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. But alas, my luck had run out some time ago, and with no leprechauns in sight, I doubted that would change any time soon. The cop waved me through. This time, when I walked through the lobby of Cielo, it had lost its energy. The party was over. The police clustered in the corner comparing notes. Romeo was back, listening, occasionally asking a question as he jotted in his notebook. A couple of security guys seemed to be on the hot seat. Romeo stepped away from the group after silencing the questioning so we could talk and he wouldn't miss anything. We met under the Chihuly chandelier of bright glass swirls in the center of the lobby. This night so far had added years to his face. Still, he looked all of 12. Man, I am so dogged. Getting too old for this, he announced, a beleaguered pro caught in the vice. Barking up the wrong tree, kid. I've got empathy, but running real short on sympathy. This totally sucks. I refused to be sucked into despondency. If I didn't keep steering the boat through the storm, I'd be swamped by a wave and sink to the bottom. You got anything? He closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. Nobody saw Teddie's white-coated guy. I did. His eyes snapped open, and his fatigue vanished. Why didn't you say that before? I did. Told you he reminded me of Irv Giddings. Remember? Yeah, that's right.
Man, this case has me chasing my tail. He gave me a worried, distracted look. I knew the feeling. Teddie. Anything to go on other than you saw him? Romeo asked, trying to do his job. Could you recognize him again? I only caught him from the back, with a slight profile. I'm not sure I could recognize my own father if that was the only view I got. Romeo deflated. But there is a bright spot. Romeo didn't rise to the bait. He was really taking this Teddie thing personally. Kid, if we find the real killer, then Teddie's home free. But what if... No what ifs. I pressed his copy of the photo Jerry had given me into his hand. Start here. This is the guy we're looking for. Romeo focused on the photo. Not a very good photo. It almost seems like he knew exactly what he was doing, giving us something, but not enough. Like, maybe he's in the system? Romeo shrugged. You know him? No, but I just can't shake the feeling he's dressed like that for a reason. I didn't mention Kimberly Cho. I needed to find her first. Any luck on tracking down the gun? Romeo gave me his best wishful thinking look. My face snapped into a frown. I could feel it crushing my joie de vivre, assuming I had any left. It's heading toward midnight on a Saturday night in Vegas. What do you think? Short of paying Mr. Giddings a visit, the answer would be no. And while many of my choices are suspect, I'm not foolish enough to go charging into Irv's lair, assuming I knew where he was hanging his hat, with nothing to go on other than a curious coincidence and armed with nothing but my sharp sword of sarcasm. So, you still think this could be personal? Then what I'd said seemed to penetrate Romeo's haze of fatigue. Isn't old Irv in jail? Irv always referred to himself in the third person, a very irritating habit, one of his many. Murder is always personal, kid. The question is, personal to whom? I rooted in my purse for my phone. Guess you didn't know Irv Giddings was sprung a few days ago. Some legal technicality. The tip of Romeo's pencil broke. I'll take that as a no. Something about the guy in the white dinner jacket reminded me of Irv. Can't put my finger on it. Irv had a dinner jacket like that, monogrammed gold buttons, and he loved red bow ties. The whole idea that Irv could be behind Holt Box's murder seemed a bit out there. If he was after me, why didn't he just kill Teddie or the big boss? Now here I go, making myself truly terrified rather than just marginally so. Maybe I'm seeing monsters where there are none. Romeo fished another pencil out of his pocket. Murder is pretty monstrous. All I know is somebody's playing games. I palmed my phone between us. Not sure if this is related to the murder, but it's worth checking out. I played the message for him. Creepy. He jotted down the number. And awfully coincidental. I turned my phone off, then dropped it in my purse. I've got Jeremy trying to trace it. Once again, you are at the vortex of a shitstorm. Romeo said it with a resigned groan. It's a gift. I'm assuming you didn't call him back. I pretended to be offended. What? And give him the satisfaction? Good. We'll reach out when we're ready. And the same rules, okay? I touched him lightly on the arm as he glanced over his shoulder at the men who were waiting. My touch brought him back. Romeo gave me a grin filled with energy. Same rules. You get to shoot him. His flush of energy arced between us, jump-starting hope. We were on the hunt. Any preliminary from the coroner? Stab wound killed him. I'm shocked. He smiled, a cat playing with a mouse. There was a blood trail. Stabbing occurred around the corner from where he died, near the walk-in refrigerator. Teddie's in the clear? I pressed, trying to tame my hope. Nothing this bad was ever that easy to fix. Romeo confirmed my cynicism. You know how this is going to go down. The media, all the hype. We'll have to take extra care that we are not only exploring every possibility, but that we actually look like we're doing exactly that. The world will be watching. It's been what, a couple of hours? I'm sure you saw them out there. The sharks are already circling. Extra scrutiny. I knew the drill. That weight was on my shoulders too, but unlike Romeo, I was used to the load. Like running the gauntlet, kid. There is an end. If they don't kill you before you get there. There is that. Although it'd be easy to jump on the Irv Giddings bandwagon and go tilt at another windmill, there was another angle. Anything on Holt Box? Any reason why someone would want to kill him? The wife is in Texas. The The local Mounties notified her. She'll be here tomorrow. Maybe she can shed some light.
Will she be staying at her husband's place in the Casbah at the Babylon? I think he had Bungalow 7.
That's what I've been told. Want to be in on the questioning? You always seem to have a lighter hand than I do.
Need you ask? Romeo returned to his men. He seemed to take my confidence with him, so I took a moment to let things settle, absorbing some of the tranquility I'd built into the lobby. My hotel, heady and terrifying. A high-octane mix of emotions that kept me putting out fires before they lit me up. Sleep was hard to come by. Alcohol and caffeine were my drugs of necessity. A limited solution, but for now, it kept the lid on. The opening only 10 days away, we were booked solid for the holidays and beyond. Casinos with their filtered air and carefully controlled party vibe, windowless rooms, and money-driven excesses weren't everyone's idea of a vacation. I was banking on the folks who wanted to separate pleasure from table play. And to be honest, Vegas had cut its teeth catering to men, with the gambling, the sports books, and the strip clubs and topless reviews for the tame crowd, the full Monty strip joints for the rowdier bunch. Time to even that playing field. Women made up an ever-increasing percentage of Vegas visitors, and it was long past time to cater to their sensibilities. Turning in a full circle, I savored the warm tile floor laced with wood, the blown glass light fixtures in all the colors of the rainbow, the art, modern but not too, bright and lively, gracing the beige walls. Even though it was costly, I went with a wallpaper of grass cloth. Desks clustered on thick rugs in oranges and greens, serving as a personal reception area. The concierge desks were opposite reception. The far wall opened into a casual piano bar and restaurant simply called the Lobby Bar. Long planters of bamboo and other grasses I didn't know the names of separated the area into smaller conversation areas, filled with comfortable couches and chairs clustered around large square tables with marble tops. The entrance to the spa was tucked into the far corner. Glass and brass, clean and comforting, where a squadron of fresh-faced experts in relaxation and comfort would greet customers and whisk them to paradise one floor up. The spa comprised the whole of the second floor, half of it the swimming pool area with a retractable glass roof. If life would just slow down, I could set up shop by the pool and never leave. Designed in the European style toward pleasure, pampering, and fabulous food, Cielo had no gaming, a risky move in Vegas, but one true to my heart, in many ways. Jean-Charles's restaurant was our calling card, lending just that perfect bit of European flair. My blood pressure eased, my mind stopped whirling. Life receded enough for calm to ooze in. Hotels I could do. Life, not so much. I clapped my hands, getting the attention of some staff that had been on hand to help with the party, and now huddled in the corner. Smiles, and get some music playing in here. I'm feeling the need for some country. I bet you guys can find the right playlist. Someone had stolen Holt Box's chance to make more music. The least we could do was honor him by playing his hits. Briefly, I wondered if that would be in bad taste. But what better way to honor the singer? Either way, someone would complain. That much I knew, and that I could handle. The elevator waited, its maw open. Techs from the coroner's office shuttled their equipment using the service elevator, then wheeled it through the lobby, the metal carts clattering on unsteady wheels. So much for subtle, and so much for calm. Real life had an ugly habit of intruding into my Las Vegas make-believe where fantasies were our job. With an eerie sense of déjà vu, as the first strains of Holt Box's deep voice singing one of his hits about trucks and Texas filtered over the sound system, I stepped into the elevator and made another solo ride to the top floor. No excited voices greeted me, no Frank Sinatra songs, no party. Someone had even turned off the light illuminating the Van Gogh. I flipped it back on as I walked by. Jean-Charles stood behind the bar, his smile back in place. It brightened when he saw me. He popped the top on a long-neck bud and placed it in front of his only customer, Dane. The long, tall drink of Texas Smooth had stepped back into my life as seamlessly as he'd left it. We had unfinished business. And, as with most of the relationships in my life where trust had been broken, and even some where it hadn't, I had no idea how to find an equilibrium again, or even if I wanted to. Not everyone deserved to be a part of my adventure, a lesson I still had trouble with. Dane had turned when I walked in, his gun at the ready. When he saw it was me, he lowered his gun, then his hand closed around his beer. I could see the questions, the unfinished issues between us, in his emerald eyes. Time had given me some perspective, but I no longer felt the need to smooth those waters. His dark, wavy hair had grayed a touch at the temples in the intervening months. It looked good on him. Without the party excitement to mask them, my steps echoed off the hardwood. A much more somber air filled the room, although Jean-Charles seemed to have once again found his footing. Filling the crystal flute next to his on the bar with matching rosé bubbles, he gave me a look with a flicker of horror in his eyes as I took a stool across from him.
Such a bad thing, this. How is your father? And your friend?
My father is in the clear. Teddie, not so much.
Did he kill Holt?
Means motive and opportunity, I muttered, mimicking Teddie. I caught Dane's sideways glance. For a moment, our eyes met. We were thinking the same thing. Barring divine intervention, Teddie was screwed.